Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this show is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and let's live in Woodstock. And we are here this evening in Woodstock, in scenic downtown Woodstock, in our TV station. And we are so happy. I am so excited about this because you are the launch program for our summer season. And I am dedicating this whole summer to the flea market. And we are in scenic downtown Woodstock. We will soon be on, this program will soon be on YouTube. And we have a guest tonight who is one of the first vendors, I guess. You were one of the first vendors that I met when I first started being a vendor at the flea market. And at the time, I was raising money to feed the hungry. And through the years, things have changed a little bit. But I'll tell you, for all the changes that have happened, Martin has not changed. These postcards have been a perennial favorite. And one of the first things that happened to me, and I'm going to tell this story, and then we're going to start the program, is Martin had his truck, and it was not far from my booth, and he was gone over to the hot dog truck or something, I don't know what. Anyway, this woman came up and said, "Well, where's the postcard man?" And I said, "Well, he's not here." And she said, "It doesn't matter whether he's here or not. I come every year to Woodstock to see these postcards." And with that, she just hopped into the back of the van and made herself at home. And I don't know how many she bought, but she had a wonderful time. So I would like for you, first of all, to introduce yourselves to our audience. Tell them your name and where we can find you. And then we'll start talking postcards in Woodstock.
Okay. Well, I'm Martin Wadler, and I live in Kingston. And basically my life on weekends and a couple of weeks over the summer is postcards. And I do a little eBay, but I prefer to work with people in the back of my van in Woodstock and just come down to Mowers Market. Is open every Saturday and Sunday, and I'm there at least probably 3/4 of the weekends. The weather's good, I'll be there, and I guess that's about it. Thurman will have my phone number, and so I don't want to, because people never have pencil and paper ready for the phone numbers.
Well,
so, yeah, but anyhow, postcards are my thing, and people say, like, why? You might ask
that
why.
That was my question.
Okay.
How did you find postcards?
Well, look, I was always interested in history, even as a kid. Okay, and majored in that in college and all that kind of thing. My parents, as a retirement thing for them, got into local history of the Catskills, particularly postcards. And I grew up around Fleischman's, Pine Hill, that area, and they had this collection. Naturally, of course, because my parents were doing it, I ignored it as long as I could. But after a while, I got into it, and there's no better way of looking at the history of the 20th century than looking at postcards. And do you want to know about history?
Well, now,
of the postcard idea.
You inherited this interest then. This was theirs?
Yeah, the interest was inherited.
Second generation.
Yes, I'm number two. They left me with about maybe 30,000 postcards to start the seed of what I have now.
Martin, were they organized?
Not that well.
So,
okay, no. So my mother had a unique filing system, God bless her soul. Anyhow, but I've made it more amenable to the public. And
how are they organized?
Okay, there's two big categories of postcards. One category is topical, things like romance or dogs or horses or hunting or fishing or sailing, or holidays. Okay, some people collect in that area. That's about maybe 15% of the about 140,000 postcards I set up with at Woodstock. Would be that area, and a lot of people like that. Costumes have changed over the years. Farming has changed. Okay, things and people are interested. So if you're interested in any antique item, a postcard kind of supports that interest. So you might be interested in, let's say, cooking. I have postcards of food and harvests and all kinds of things like that.
Do you have postcards with recipes on them?
Yes, I do have.
Wow.
Okay, I didn't bring those, but I have those. No, but a whole nother topic, maybe 85% of what I set up with, and I think the thing most people start with is hometowns. Hometown. So that means that I have the whole world in my van, to make a bad rhyme, and they're organized by New York State's by county, for instance, and New Jersey, and it's also by county. Other states I do by town, for whatever various reasons.
What if
You want another
somebody was
reason for
born
that?
in Texas?
Well, they get my hearty congratulations, and then they would ask, like, if you want Laredo, I have it. Yes,
Okay, so whatever town they can come up with,
I'll have it. Yes,
you'll have it.
Now, some people will want. I mean, even within that, I say, okay, there's my Texas cards, but then there's things like postcards of Texas songs, and that's the state flag, and there's always something about the Longhorns of Texas.
Well, now, those postcards, they don't go in the Texas file, do they? They go in the other file.
Oh, that's a big controversy, but generally speaking, yes. If there's anything Texas stays with Texas. People in Texas are they want Texas. I mean, anything
Well, what
Texas
about
is.
Chicago? If somebody comes from Chicago and you have the towns in Illinois and things, but then what if you...
Within Chicago, I have things like Chicago museums, Chicago transportation, Chicago schools, and government buildings and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of the bigger cities I break, like New York City. Well, just Manhattan, I have 2,800 cards broken down by all kinds of things, the waterfront to advertising, all the name big
well,
buildings.
and all those museums in New York City.
Yes. However, I was bought out in November, so I'm weak on museums. I would bought all my
really?
Yeah, I'll catch up. Okay.
You were bought out in November?
Yeah, a dealer from New York City bought all my museums. The nerve of that guy. Really.
Absolutely.
But I started
that
rebuilding. I'm down to
hiker.
over the winter I've started building them back up.
That's the lazy man's way to do it. He came up here to Woodstock, probably on a weekend, cleaned you out, and then went back to New York City and said, I have all this stuff.
I met him, actually, to be fair, I met him at the postcard rendezvous of the country, which happens to be in New York, Pennsylvania, the weekend before Thanksgiving. And 79 of the best postcard dealers in the country set up there by invitation, and they let me come too. So there's 80.
Oh, they're by invitation.
Oh, yeah, and it's in a large fairgrounds building, and yes, that's where I got also. Another guy bought all my Ohio.
How do you get an invitation?
Yeah, they'll find you. Okay.
Really?
Yes. I mean, it's just the most whatever postcard dealers who have a clue more about what we do. I mean, there's lots of little details. I mean, by the way, you haven't asked me in these past 5 minutes where the idea came from.
Well, that wasn't even on the radar, Martin. There's all this other stuff.
Well, it's a start.
I can't believe you don't have any kind of a flag or an emblem or whatever that you can raise that says I get invited to the show every. You're not in the top 80.
The woman
You
who
need to
came,
advertise.
I don't remember, who went into the van and found what she wanted, is proof enough. Okay, I mean, I have customers that come to Woodstock year after year and say, okay, what do you have for me? And sometimes I concentrate on the car, keeping my stuff well supplied. And if I have happy customers who find what they like, then I've kind of accomplished what I want to do. And And they also, I can pretty much tell you when I look at a postcard how old it is. So if you say, okay, I mean, a couple will come along from, they live in Brooklyn now, but she's from Denmark and he's from Kansas. And I can supply them each with stuff if their hometowns are nearby, and tell them how old it was and and they can say, well, okay, and see how things have changed. Yeah. I mean,
how do you find all these things?
I tell you, I've been doing this for so long that mostly they find me. When I set up at the larger antique shows, or even sometimes at Woodstock, people come to me with collections and say, okay, they don't know what to do with them. It was their uncles or something like that. And I found some great collections over the years, some interesting stuff, some stuff that is utterly not unimportant or undesired, but some stuff that's really cool. So you want to hear about the best one I ever
Yes.
I was doing a postcard show west of Albany, and an old couple came up to me, and they looked like Mom and Pa out of the, that painting there, American Gothic.
Yeah.
Okay. Very straight-looking people, upstate people. Okay, they have a shoebox of cards, and I saw it. I said, I paid them a lot. I don't remember how much it was, but a lot. And they had another shoebox somewhere, and they called me a couple years later, and I paid a lot for that too. Why? Because it turns out their uncle was a vaudeville performer in New York City in the 1920s. Now, how many vaudeville performers do you think there were in New York City in the 1920s? Everybody was a vaudeville, right? So he was smart. He got on the train and he went west. So I have in Western postcards, which is another, scene topic. Of course, the Rockies are still there. Red Rocks and Colorado and the Sawtooths and all of these beautiful mountains are still there. Nobody wants them anymore because they can go take a picture now. They don't want them. I mean, they were interesting to send back east in a time when we didn't have that much picture information. But what he did, being a member of the theater and having an ego, he took pictures of where he was performing or got postcards of them. And it was all these downtown Red Lodge, Montana. You know how hard that is to get? It's surrounded by, it's just the entryway to Yellowstone Park. So you can't get that. So it was full of these little towns. I can't remember the name of all of them, but anyway, Eugene, Oregon. And then he just went from town. Of course, he was a big deal there because he was a New York vaudeville performer. Sometimes they didn't have a theater; it was just a local main street, and he circled the bar or something like that. So then when I went to York with that shoebox, the Western dealers mobbed me because they can't get them. I mean, just that, and other parts. I mean, it happens to be that you asked about finding postcards. The Northeast of the United States is kind of a treasure trove because in the postcard era, between 1900 and World War I, there was no air conditioning anywhere in the South, and then for years after that. And what happened, and the West just didn't have much population. So everything was coming here. So the average attic or closet or wherever you're going to put these things isn't as humid as it is in the South. Their paper rots. Mm-hmm. Same places like the Philippines. I have Asian dealers that come to me at the bigger shows that'll buy all of my Philippines or Indonesia or places like that. Were just too humid for paper to have survived.
And yours are surviving, so they buy them because they exist.
Right. I don't, it's no special thing I do. I just keep them out of humidity, basically, and out of harsh sunlight. But most of the time, people really didn't take care of them that well. So there was a huge amount of postcards sent, but not that many have survived. But people do hear about me, find me. General estate buyers save them for me.
Wow. So you have this whole network of people that have you in their Rolodex and they contact you.
It's not as sophisticated as Rolodex. More or less, they come see me at a show, they bring me a shoebox or a whiskey case full of postcards and tell me what they want for them. And I always pay.
Okay,
Okay.
that has a lot to do with it right there.
Yeah, because they just, the filing is rather difficult, and most people just don't know. And we got these postcards spread in front of us, okay? They're called Gruß aus, greetings from in German. And the first postcards, although it was an American invention, the first postcards actually were published in Austria. And they had a good railway system, but they were looking to unite a very polyglot country at the time. And postcards helped do that. And they made very beautiful postcards, if you take, I don't hold them up, but of their area. And then Germans and Swiss also basically, Germany had just unified. So they picked up on the idea. And then it wasn't until 1893 that cards became popular in the United States, or even used. Well, really popular by about 1900. Again, as the railway system took off, before telephones were really practical for most people. And a town like Woodstock had 2 mailings a day.
Wow.
So post office, and a town like Kingston, 3.
Wow.
So you could see on an old postcard sometimes, I'll be there tonight, I mean, the system worked real well because it needed to.
So what you're telling me then is that a postcard is generally a 20th century phenomenon.
Yes, and actually, it's pretty much disappeared by now. So it's really 20th century. I mean, they exist. They're not as neat. They're not as colorful. And basically, we don't need them anymore because we send our messages on the phone and all that kind of thing. But
So if people are kind of intrigued by this and they want to begin, say if you're young enough, you can begin to buy current postcards, and then 50, 60 years from now, you're going to have something.
you may. I don't know what the future holds. But you can even buy now 120-year-old postcards from people like me, and then you definitely will have something rare because they're not making them as good as they used to be. Sorry.
What does that mean? Are we talking about the quality of the paper?
Quality of the printing mainly. The paper
Really?
too. Here, this is Woodstock. This first chunk here is Woodstock. These are all about 1910 or so. And here's a view from I can't see what it says there, maybe looks like Overlook Mountain. Looks like this is out towards Shady. That's the church down.
There's the church here on the green.
Yes, okay. And that card, okay. And here's Risley's boarding house, about the same period, okay.
We now have a lot of boarding houses still in Woodstock.
Well, you can see they were a little, I wouldn't say classier, but they looked a little,
They call
like
them
a
all
hotel.
Airbnbs.
yeah, well,
Boarding house, people talk about boarding houses as being of the past, but they're really not.
no,
In Woodstock, they're just as popular now as they were then.
yes, I think so. But if you feel the paper, you see the old paper feels different,
Ah, yes.
okay?
It's
And
a
if you-
much better, it's a much more durable product.
Yes, it was made to be, go through the mail and get even some water on it. Now, here, look at, I think this is Lake Hill. See, if you put a magnifying glass on that, you'll see detail that you don't get with a modern card.
Lake Hill. Oh my goodness.
And by the way, most of these cards in that pre-World War I period, we call it the postcard era, were printed in Germany. They were the best printers in the world. If you think of like Gutenberg, they were the best, simply the best printers.
So the person took the photograph and shipped the photograph to Germany
Yes,
to a printer
yes.
who printed the postcards.
And guessed at the colors.
Really?
Yeah. The
Right,
lines were
because
great.
the photographs were black and white.
Yes, they had to guess at the colors in that period, and yeah, they were
Did they fade?
Only if you get light on them. Okay, but then and these, if you look at this little stack here, these are all postcards. Initially, by the way, you weren't allowed on the backside anything but the address. And then in March 1907, they allowed the address to be there, the message as well.
Where can people, if somebody in Woodstock wants to buy a postcard today to send, where do you find one?
I never looked in Woodstock. I guess there must be, I don't know. Yeah. If they want an old one, come see me at the flea market, but a new one.
If you want a contemporary one, we don't know.
Yeah, but people, they just take out their phone, they take a picture that way. But what I wanted to tell you, so that's another way I can look at a postcard and know how old it is certain printing cues, okay? I mean, as you proceed along in, let's say, in Woodstock history, or anywhere in the United States, a big change occurred in World War I. What happened in World War I? Well, about 12 million people died. But also, postcards stopped being printed
For what, 5
Germany.
years? Oh, they stopped being printed
Well, we
in
were at
Germany
war.
forever.
Okay, there was a big anti-German thing, so you had to, we switched, and we went to another style of postcard. And it wasn't as good, the printing wasn't as sharp, but we call it the white border style. And the white border was done both as a war measure to save ink and valuable resources during World War I, and to say to people, this isn't German, it's an American printing. And the printing isn't as sharp, but it's American. So people bought, that was this, and that style's held on through the 20s, that a postcard should have a white border like that. And they're still kind of old and neat. They're not quite as sharp as the other ones. This is the Rockledge residence of Stephen Ayers in Woodstock, New York. That's 1920s. It's like a nice house. Okay. I don't.
So that's a postcard of a private residence.
Yes. If you were now this is kind of maybe of Woodstock interest particularly. This is the studio of a guy named Jones, who did a lot of photographs and postcards of Woodstock and the area, and quite a character in the 20s and 30s. Eventually he moved to Tennessee. There's other followings, and he deserted it. But here, this doesn't look all that different. Here's the old Woodstock Inn on the
Look at
green.
the car.
Well, it's old, yes. But the building is still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cars are kind of cheating. I generally use the printing cues as a way. No, but then what happened after the 1920s was another transition to postcards. Remember, 1929 is the Great Depression in the United States. And people, like if you think of the movies of the 30s, they're big and bold and big boobed women, and everything is kind of cartoonish, and people wanted away from so the style of the postcards changed, and they're better, brighter colors, less detail, and a different type of paper was used. We call it a linen. You put your finger, you can feel the bumpy surface.
Yes.
And almost stands out like a mosaic painting, the bumpy surface, and it highlights the colors a little bit. They work really good for framing, in a hallway or something like that. They stand out more because mainly, and here's the Playhouse. Oh, sorry, World, here we go, Playhouse.
Wow. Well, and the Playhouse is still there.
Well,
They're still using it.
Yes, and this is the Overlook Mountain, which is still there.
So, does it make any difference in the value of a postcard if it has been mailed? If it has been, like these have never been used?
That's true. And those ones are pre-1900, by the way. They're about 1880.
But here, this is a good example. you've got 2 postcards that you can't write anything, you can do the address. And then you've got 2 that you can write on,
Yeah,
and one
these
you-
are a little earlier.
Okay,
And-
these
and-
are earlier.
And if you flip them over, you'll see that they had a white space here where you're supposed to write your message.
Oh.
Okay, so that was just the style of the time. So the image is a little affected by having the message there often, but on the other hand, you know it's older. It's a definite proof. Now with Germany, here was 1907, with Germany I believe was around 1903,
Oh, you want me to hold it up? Okay.
where people could write on the and put the message on the back. They were a little ahead of us in that. And I think England was a year later. So it depends on the country, but yeah, it's a little, but you're asking about value. Okay,
I'm saying
people
you
often
have
ask, so here's the
2
hard,
postcards exactly alike.
and one was written and one wasn't. Which
Right.
one's more valuable?
Yes.
Okay. If you're looking like those cards just for the art of them, and you're collecting just with that in mind, then unwritten is better. However, okay, if you're thinking, I'm interested in the history of the card. You're getting a card of Woodstock, and the person's talking about how cold it was and was dated in April, okay? Or, something about going to see someone. It has a little bit of historical information on the back of that card. So as for historical interest, the writing is nice, okay? You don't, by the way, you can't use if it has a postal cancel on it. All it can tell you is the postcard wasn't printed after that. But a postcard, those cards right there that are 140 years old, you could mail tomorrow. And the post stamp would be like,
Wow.
now, and it wouldn't help you date the postcard.
Wow.
Okay. And, yeah, and you can see those were actually printed in Germany to be used in Germany. Somehow they ended up here.
So what you have just revealed to us, and I'm sure you may have thought about it ahead of time, but something that I never really thought about is there are different ways to collect postcards.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you can collect postcards because you like postcards that have donkeys on them, or you can collect
have a-
postcards because it's Woodstock, or you can collect postcards, for whatever reason.
Well, yes, but here's the trouble. As a postcard dealer, if I have a postcard with a donkey on it and it's in Woodstock, do I put it with my horse relative section and my topical cards, or do I put it with Woodstock? Texas, you just put it with Texas. But in any case, there's people who collect all kinds of things. Maple syrup collectors are a world unto their own, and they don't care where it was. Okay, so I do have a section or farming for maple syrup. But then there's collectors of, some things are just varied. I have a category of beach life, and some people collect beach cards just because they love beaches. And then there's some who collect beaches because they're looking for a specific one. Okay. And but I think the bulk of people are looking for their particular hometown. Again, but that doesn't mean I have horse collectors and horse racing collectors and baseball people. So that's its own separate sect of collecting. It's a whole nother world. But as far as chronology goes, and you're looking at postcards, the cards of the 30s that we called them, like I said, the linens, the big bold colors, gave way after World War II to a new kind of card. Again, industry had developed, and inks and chemistry had developed. So the new kind of card we called a chrome, dealing with the fine finish. And those are modern cards like, this here that they look like postcards of today. Okay, there's a camp in Woodstock in 1977, by the way. I don't know if anybody's on TV now who could recognize the camp, but there you are, okay. That was Woodstock 77 in that summer camp. And I guess this is one of the galleries off the square here.
You know, these look like photographs.
Yes.
These postcards look like art.
Yes.
They were painted.
Yes, because, okay, what happened in the 1880s and 90s was that Germany, Austria, Switzerland were trying to get more unified, especially Austria and Germany. And they tried to make their different cities and provinces look as good as they possibly could. So they did that by painting. And that was like the end of what we call the Romantic era. Now, what happened, for better or worse, was that was replaced in philosophical theory by a group called the positivists, who wanted everything exact. So that's where the precision of the cards come into play. And that's like, I have cards, for instance, of the Panama Canal being built that show the exact details, and that was in style, again, true World War I. Basically,
Wow.
their theory was technology is going to solve all the problems of the world. You've heard that before now.
Right, right.
Well, the World War I comes along, and some of that technology includes tear gas and machine guns, and technology wasn't viewed quite as well after World War I as it had been before.
Right.
Okay, so that's one kind of thing. But you mentioned about stuff that people collect, and I have a few things of interesting here. I thought I'd show you one here you might get a kick out of. There's Kingston, there's Reverend Woodstock. I know there's territorial influences there. And this is general stuff. I will cover that. How about Black history?
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So, if you look at these are postcards of the teens and 20s, you can see black people as like part of like Southern life, more or less, okay, on these three. And they're a little derogatory, a little demeaning, but not too bad. By the 1920s, many Americans don't realize that there had been some progress made in World War I, black soldiers and things like that. And then on their own, things like the Harlem Renaissance occurred. And there's kind of a boom in black culture. And it's shown in the 1920s.
Wow.
Look here. I mean, the images of people working, accomplishing, doing things.
Now, those are photographs or
Those are printed postcards from the 1920s.
print, but they
You
were
see the white
photographs
border
that were printed.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. And then comes the 30s, where they're either not so much photographs usually as drawings that are made kind of big and bold and very racist. I mean, a black kid on the alligator, and sexual stereotyping and things like that. Why? Because this 30s was a time of hard times, and during hard times, one human thing is to take things out on somebody else. So it was not a good time for minorities. And then again, World War II happens, and the Civil Rights Movement, and black people get a different portrayal most of the time, postcards. And these are, I have several representative, these aren't just cherry picked, these are the trends at the time.
Wow.
Okay. So, I mean, there's.
Do you get a lot of calls for those postcards?
Yeah. I mean, there's people who collect everything. Like I say, the biggest one is small towns. I'll tell you one neat thing that, let's say, you can see in New Paltz and Kingston, but you can't see in Woodstock. Sorry. If you look on Main Street, New Paltz, on a hot or cold day, and you're watching the street carefully, you can see two lines on the street. What are those two lines? Those lines are trolley tracks. In most every place in the United States, except if you're out in the sticks, like, well, Woodstock, sorry, you had a trolley car. You could take a trolley from New York City to Wisconsin, just exchange it. Be a nickel, take a long time, but you could exchange your fare and just get one into the other, and go right across the country. And you can see remnants of the old trolley tracks. And if you look at some of those pictures,
Well, and of course, Woodstock didn't have any.
Woodstock, sorry, you didn't have any.
We had a train station, but we didn't have a train.
I didn't know you even had a train station.
Yes, we did. We do. It's a
Yeah.
bar now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. They make good use of it.
It was a hairdresser's. It was a beauty salon in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I thought I had one here, here's still the Sawkill. That's nothing much
Well,
the same.
listen. If I want to look, I'm just really curious now. I'm sitting here and asking myself, how many years has it been since I saw a metal display of postcards? I don't know, 20, 30 years?
This summer you saw it on my book. I had a medal. But yeah, I mean, I got one of those and I have it out there. For some things to draw the crowds in. By the way, here's another. But I want to show you another little funny thing about Woodstock. This is main drag at Tinker Street right here, right? Oh yeah. Sorry, folks. Okay. We get involved in our own conversation here, forgetting about you guys out in the world.
Oh, we do that all the time here.
Okay, but that was dirt road.
Right.
And one of the little conveniences of life that we take for granted now is the idea that you can put your laundry out, you can sit on your porch, everything's not going to get coated with dust.
Right.
Certain times a year, the dust would just blow on the street.
And you couldn't put your laundry out.
And it also gives you, here, look, this is the east end of Woodstock. Notice, like all the area from 375 along 212,
Yeah.
and most of it's just country. There's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't that big of anything there, okay?
Oh, can I see these? This is fascinating. Well, I noticed that you do have a crowd. I mean, people do come to your booth.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, that's kind of what I'm there for.
But I've never. The closest I ever got to your truck was when I brought you some postcards, and I was thinking, God, I hope he takes them. I don't want to throw them away. And you did. You were gracious enough to take them.
I don't remember, but thank you.
Well, there weren't that many. I mean, it was not that big of a deal. And now I don't even know where they're sold.
Well, in any case, the reason people come to me is because I have stuff that they want. The reason I have stuff they want is, I make it available to them, and they have an interest in seeing the way things were. I mean, our towns have changed, and especially I'm very happy to report that my biggest crowd is young people. And things like for our vintage, think of it. When you were a kid, there was the newspaper. You got mail, and it was important. And a night you turned on TV, and there were 3 or 4 channels, and you got to, Now they have instant communication, and almost nothing in their lives is on paper. They look at something like postcards and they just don't understand how people communicated this way. And it's kind of a kick for them. And that they live in a town like, we get a lot of people from Westchester coming up, or Long Island coming up in the summer, the city, and they see that, oh yeah, there was something called Chinatown. There was parts of New York City that were that looked some ways the same, but in some ways very different. There were things like push cards and that kind of thing. I'm looking here. Here's if you wanted to see it, is it?
What is the age what is the age category of most of your collectors?
Not a polite question to ask, is it? Let's see. I would say at Woodstock.
Anywhere.
I'm saying, well, the Woodstock crowd is different because that's people who are just coming over, and this may be the first postcard they bought. I would say they're around, probably average around 30. I mean, that's about not quite half of me. I mean, you know what I mean? Or less than half. I mean, so yeah, they're pretty young, and they're pretty, like I said, they're interested in older things.
So when you sell these postcards, do they ask historical questions?
Yes. They all very often. In fact, the first thing I'll ask them is where they're from and if they want to see what their town looked like 100 years ago. And and then they come up with something they don't think I have that place, which is kind of a challenge, but I usually do. So we get a lot of people from the West Coast, and I have a good California, Washington, Oregon collection, you know. And yeah, they're very. I'm very happy with the young people as far as this kind of thing, because the people, yeah, we're dying off, and we need some young people to take over. Okay, here and another thing. I mean, I think that postcards are kind of neat with is you can support like a historic theory. Now there a historian named Turner speculated that American culture, farming, changed when we crossed the Appalachians to places like Texas, your native country. Okay? And what happened then? Well, you had instead of an abundance of wood, water, and hills, you had the opposite. And therefore, they had to change farming. Something like the Homestead Act had very mixed success because the farm size was based on eastern United States size of 160 acres, which isn't enough for the less fertile, less watered soil of a place like Nebraska or Texas. So farming changed, and I have postcards here that illustrate that kind of thing, how the big improvements in, well, here's the early combines here. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but early farm machinery was first used out west, where it was, and before that they were using multiple horses or mules to pull plow or oxen to pull cows, because they had to cover more ground quickly. It was a different kind of farming, and then eventually they got a different kind of wheat and things like that. But you can see that in these early postcards, because they're shortly after basically that adaptation worked. And the American agricultural miracle that made us so commercially successful even before we got into World War I happened because of the farming developments out west. Okay. Hudson Valley, we produced milk, okay, which is nice. Okay, but we'd go early in colonial times. We'd produced wheat, but it was no longer efficient by the time that happened. Okay, I mean they had to develop things like irrigation. Okay, they didn't have wood, so that's called a soddy. Do you remember those in Texas? You heard of those?
Yes.
Okay, a house basically built out of sod instead of bricks. You know, the lumber, you know, stick-built houses didn't come into the railroads came in, and Sears catalog came in, and you could buy a house at the depot.
Yes.
They came in all together. So anyhow, look, I'm one of many vendors at Woodstock. I know you're going to be running the service, and there's lots of great people who really know their stuff. I mean, you know, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to mention any names because I'd be playing favorites, but there's people who specialize, you know, a couple of gals specialize in crystals and pottery, and you know, I think that people get a pretty good deal when they walk around the market for, you know, what they have, you know, what people have to offer.
The thing that impresses me about the market in Woodstock is that we do have vendors who do know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's why when I finally realized if I'm pushy enough, I can get everybody in here. And it is going to be such an accomplishment and such a pleasure, because people who come to the market and sell whatever it is they're selling, they know what they've got.
Yeah, But are the people who come in the late afternoon willing to sing, is the question.
Willing to sing?
Should we tell them that secret?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Roughly at 5 o'clock, if you come to the market, you will be given a song sheet. And then we sing to Olga the Potter.
Yes.
That's what we do. And you're not required to, but you will be encouraged to sing along. And should they know the reason for that?
Of course.
Okay. Well, Olga is a very intelligent woman. And very,
extremely.
Yes, and but she tends to be a slow packer. And for whatever reason, okay, so what I used to do is I used to stay afterwards and just hang out or wait, do my evening meditation thing, and then wait for her to finish packing. She doesn't want help. She didn't like help, but I just didn't want to leave being alone in the field. It was getting dark and stuff like that. So then I thought, well, I'll encourage her, and I'll play anthems and stuff like that on the phone for her, to get her moving, And I was playing "O Canada," as it turned out, and she said, as a cultured European, she said the person is singing it off key. Okay, I didn't know. Well, on key, off key, what do I care? So I fixed her. So next time I got together with a bunch of co-conspirators, and we sang "O Canada" to her. And we did. Well, I was glad there were no. Well, there was one Canadian who was fairly insulted by it. But so anyhow, so she said we did well. Canadian said no. So then we've switched to other songs. But the purpose was to encourage you to get going. But it's what we do. We sing songs, and people are some of them have really nice voices, I mean, the visitors, not us, but the visitors do.
And this is,
my voice is better than John's, the promoters. That's what I can say. That is my claim to musical fame.
I have not participated in the singing because I am a tuneless wonder.
Well,
If
you'll
there
fit
ever
right
was
in.
one.
Yes.
You're right. So I haven't done it, but I do know that Olga is very talented, and she does have a lot of skills.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful that we stay and make sure that she's not there by herself. Right. Although quite often I have to leave early.
Well, we always, people in Woodstock watch out for each other very, very, very much. And I don't think there's much thievery or stuff like that going on because everybody's watching everybody else. But I mean, plenty of times, as you mentioned earlier, I'll just walk away from my booth if I have to get a hot dog or I just want to go to Bread Alone and get some sandwich or something. And people just automatically cover me. We get each other's stuff and our neighbors pull together. And another thing about, someone asked me about being a vendor. And I said, just don't worry about it. Bring a table and we'll fill in the rest for you. We'll take, a tent is nice, but you don't need it. And everybody helps each other, as all the vendors, will supply extra tables if something breaks, we have tools to fix it. And if your car doesn't start, don't worry about it. We'll get it started. And if you left your lights on or something like that, all that stuff is all part of what we do. So let's see, what else can I tell you about postcards?
Well, I'll tell you, I never realized that there was so much to a postcard.
Right.
And now I have been bitten, and I.
Were you from in Texas?
I don't tell.
Oh.
I really don't even admit to the state anymore. I just, I have been a resident of New York State now for over 25 years. It is my home.
Nah, it doesn't count.
And yes, it does.
Okay.
And
no,
you
sorry.
know what? I love New York State, and I love paying my New York State taxes every year.
Well, if you really enjoy it that much, you can pay some of mine too. If you want.
The reason I am so happy to pay my New York State taxes every year is because when I was in Virginia, we paid the same amount of money and we got nothing. And here in New York, you pay all this money, but then when the snow and the ice comes, you get up the next morning, it's sunup or whatever, and the streets are clear. And in the DC metro area, you can't get out of your driveway for 3 weeks.
I would say is that my friend in Iowa's taxes, property similar value, his taxes are about a third of mine. They've got schools, they've got roads, they keep the roads clean. You know, I think New York State could be improved in a lot of ways, but I've never lived in Virginia, so I can't speak to that.
Oh.
But I tell you something about Texas. I've only been there once, and there's Brimfield, Massachusetts. It's a small town, smaller than Woodstock, has a great antique show, and 3 times a year, about 10,000 antique deals. And that's one of the reasons I might not be at Woodstock. I won't be there at Woodstock the opening day, because they'll be in this place called Brimfield, Massachusetts. If you know Mass, between Worcester and Springfield is close enough. Anyhow, and then there's a smaller show in Bouckville, New York, southwest of Utica, in August. Very nice, about a third the size of Brimfield. But the Texas equivalent is called Round Top, and it occurs, I believe, in April and October. And one year I did go down there and had the scheduling and all that, and able to do it. And what I found in Texas was that people were so extremely friendly. It was, I mean, just ridiculously friendly. But I did do my, I was very impressed. They're not, not this thing like a cowboy movie, but I did my part to help solidarity amongst the states, because there was late at night the show. Everybody was like just people around 5 o'clock. Everybody was just hanging out. And there was some customers there, and evidently they locked their keys in the car, and the deputy sheriff was there trying to get the keys out of the car. I saw him struggling and all this kind of thing. I said, "Excuse me, sir, may I help? I'm from New York, and I happen to have the knack of pulling keys. If you ever have a problem with Woodstock, I do have the ability to get keys out of a car with a bent coat hanger. Just a skill." I said, so I got it out in like, half a minute. And I said to the deputy sheriff, I said, "Look, you guys throw ropes around cows' heads. In New York, this is what we do. We take keys out of cars." And he's about happy to help, And he's like, "Thank you, sir." And I mean, they were just very, very polite, nice people. So, I mean, you may be the exception, but I'm saying the people in Texas, I was very impressed with the state that wise, So,
Where is Round Top?
Round Top is in the corner. It's, if you drew a line between Dallas, Houston, and Austin, where the 3 lines met, I would say.
That Round Top.
Well, okay, that's that Round Top. Again, it's a tiny little town where a bunch of antique dealers descend upon. One of the nice things about Woodstock, I mean, I have people, customers that see me in Brimfield, serious antique people, and they say, "Oh, I'll catch you in Woodstock." It's not exhausting. I mean, we have a flea market. There's about 30, 40 vendors. I mean, it's very sane. You can take your dog. You can. There's snacks right nearby. It's a laid back. You can look at one thing, and your friend can look at something else, and you go back and forth. It's not 100 vendors or something like that. I mean, some of the places around that have a huge amount of people, it gets to be work. And I've seen that with people. So you buy something at Woodstock, your car's not that far away. You can drive. If it's a big thing, you can drive your car in and put it in the car. And, and we help everybody do everything. Yeah.
Well, and there is people get along. It's fun. We're looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, we do look forward to it.
And
we're not going to tell you about the secret party we're having tomorrow of all the vendors. Okay, so I'm going to tell you where it is.
I really wish we could open earlier, in the season, because and also we used to do Wednesday nights, and that was my favorite, was Wednesday nights.
I never came up for a Wednesday night. Never didn't know about it.
Wednesday.
I mean, I knew about it, but I never
it was the farmer's market.
Yeah.
And on Wednesday nights, they brought out the park benches, and people got, food at the farmer's market and sat down in the park benches and ate it. And they kind of hung around for a while. And I bet there weren't even 20 booths, but everybody was really looking and really enjoying. It was a very kind of a slow, laid back, midweek thing.
Well, we still have people that get to bring their sandwiches out and sit under things. I have people sit in the shade of my van sometimes, and they nurse their babies, and the babies run around, the dogs. I've made it's a policy that I have. One thing Woodstock people, visitors, always forgive is on a hot day. Well, you don't always, but about 50% of them do. Is on a hot day, if you've got your dog, you got to bring water. But don't worry about it. If you come by my booth, I'll ask you if you have water for you, and I have a watering bowl for the dogs.
That's true.
And snacks if they want.
You can tell when that dog is really, really thirsty.
So you got to take care of the dogs.
But
and the children, we don't. Yeah, they're fine. Whatever.
They get along fine.
Yeah.
I will say this. You said we're down to 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. This has been a wonderful hour. I am so glad that you came. We have enjoyed it so much. And Ellen, I am so grateful. It's been a long, dry spell. We haven't had a show in here in 2 or 3 weeks or something, and I've really missed the show. Thank you so much, Ellen, and good evening to you, and thank you again.
And the nice people are coming after me. They're the nicer vendors. They're smarter, they're good-looking people. They'll be coming along in the next few weeks. I know them. And they're a lot of fun. And I mean, I'm thinking of of course, we'll see some people tomorrow at the party. But I mean, I'm looking forward to there's the lady who makes the jam.
Yeah.
I've forgotten how good that jam is. I used it up over the fall, and then you don't have it anymore. And and then there's people you can ask, the gals who do the crystal stuff. I mean, they know okay, which thing you use for what thing, all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's another guy who makes chessboards or cutting boards and great, beautiful stuff. I mean, all I do is collect it and organize it.
That is a huge feat. This is not for sissies. This is not for sissies. This is big time. Okay, we're down to it. We really got to go now. Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. We will see you this summer.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Look forward to it, world.